Hello, Slush. Are there any people in the audience who want to make money by investing in exciting companies? Some. Are there any people who want to found a startup in order to make money? Okay, any people who are having this kind of goals or whatever, they are always looking for an industry that might be tempting, that might have a huge potential. And education is an extremely interesting one. If you are thinking about the size of the market, education, depends how you count, is huge. There are many estimates, but some of the estimates are saying that the size of the education market is way over 10 trillion US. So it's one of the biggest markets in the world. And so on. And also, many people are looking for industries which are waiting to be disruptive. Meaning is that they are industries that there are some elements which obviously don't work. And education is a great example on that sense as well, which means that most of the education industry or systems or education systems all over the world were created roughly about 100 years ago. And everyone agrees, no matter whether you go to Australia, you go to US, you go to Africa, you go to India, everyone seems to agree is that there's a big need for making some kind of change. So then why on earth, if you go through any industry in the world, no matter you go to a transportation, you go to media, you have huge amount of examples of companies who have made kind of like a radical change. There's Uber, there's Airbnb, there's Netflix, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, and so on and so on. But if one would ask is that, what are the Ubers or Airbnbs of education? There isn't any. And that makes it an exciting area. And what is the main reason for this one? In many other industries, it's the problem of ideas, which means that there are not great ideas. In education, it's totally different. It's not an innovation problem, it's an implementation problem. Education all over the world is happening in silos. Germany is a silo, Mannheim is a silo, every city in Mannheim is a silo, and there are gatekeepers all over the world. So no matter what kind of idea you have, they just don't travel because gatekeepers are all over the world. And this is something we have to change in order to make education great. And there are a lot of great companies who are trying to do it, and even they are having big problems. There's another interesting dilemma in education, and the problem with that one is that if you are thinking of any industry in the world, most of the great startups come from Silicon Valley. But if you are thinking about education, there are a lot of great innovations happening in the US. But if you are thinking about the profile or the quality of the US education system in general, it's not the best one in the world. So this is kind of like the key thing that our panel is trying to be discussing about, which means that how do we come up with great ideas that could travel from country to country to country. And it's an interesting, my daughter at the moment is 16. And when my daughter is kind of like spending her time any day outside of the school, her days are extremely international. He's chatting, he's discussing, but when she goes to school, almost everything is national. So pretty much every school in the world is a national silo. And if we want to create a next generation of global citizens, I think that this is something we will have to change, and we will have to change it fast. But the dilemma is huge, and it's not simple. So what is kind of like my opinion in here is that education has been traditionally extremely top-down system. There are decision makers who decide what are the innovations that will work and what are the innovations that won't work. I think we have to change that one. So we need to have a bottom-up approach, which means that we have to listen to the people who are in the classroom, meaning teachers, because there's great innovations happening in Finland, there's great innovations happening in Singapore, great innovations happening in California, but we have to identify them. But we also need to have a top-down approach because we need to have bold decision makers who let people do this, who kind of like have a genuine belief in the people who are working on classrooms day to day. This is what we are trying to do in 100. Our goal is to be the world's leading expert on scalable innovations by 2020. We want to recognize the best innovations in all continents, and we want to help them spread. It's not going to be an easy task, but it's an extremely motivating task. One innovation that we truly love, we will release together with Slush in 30 minutes after this great panel. But now with these words, I'll give the stage to Linda, Liukas, and the great panel. Thanks so much.
Welcome, have a seat.
Thank you.
Super. So I think between the four of us, we have all the aspects of the educational technology ecosystem represented here. And today we're going to talk about Finland. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about scaling things, and we're going to talk about how does the Slush atmosphere and the mentality and attitude of being world-class combine with the traditional wonderful way of Finnish schools of providing equity for everyone. But to get started with our panel, I would like to ask each and every one of you one question. So Luben, as a representative from the investor side, as a partner at GSV, are educational technology startups special snowflakes? Do they get special treatment, or do they follow your regular investment thesis as a venture fund?
Well, it's a special focus area of ours. You know, my partners, Michael Mo and Deborah Quazo, have been looking at this industry already for the last 20 years. And, you know, what we've seen over the last 5 years is that it's really starting to happen. Technology is starting to get into education. It's disrupting the traditional model. So it's been a very large focus of ours. That said, from an investment standpoint, they don't get a different treatment. You know, we have our different strategies and philosophy on how we look at companies to invest.
So what is the criteria you use when you look at education technology companies? Or any companies?
The most important thing is always the people, because there's so many ideas and there's hundreds of people working on the same thing, but at the end of the day, the ones that will prevail and will really be the big companies in the future are those with the best management teams. So that's the first thing. Obviously, it has to be a great product that makes sense, that's disruptive. There has to be a big market and opportunity. And those are kind of the key things, and then we can go deeper after that.
So Olli-Pekka, as the Director General of the Finnish National Board of Education, you kind of represent the public policy and government side of things. What do you feel like the public policy, when it comes to education, has to learn from Slush?
The attitude. I think the attitude of kind of renewal and kind of innovate. And that's the big challenge. Saku was just talking about the thing that traditionally the education policies have been kind of top-down approach. That's a too slow way to do education policy in the future. So we have to be able to embed the idea of innovating inside the education system, and then we must kind of connect the kind of identity of teachers as developers. And that's, of course, then we must give the schools and teachers also a lot of autonomy to develop their work, room for maneuver, for new things, for experiment. And of course, I think that is something where we have in Finland gone to the right direction, thanks to the high quality of education of teachers.
Wonderful. And Sanna, with a like deep background in educational content and being a startup founder yourself, working in this realm, I bet you don't think that the killer app of education is going to be an app. What do you think is sort of the secret of like content and operations and technology when it comes to a successful educational startup, and in your case, Fun Academy?
I've been working in the traditional publishing field for decades, so working for the Finnish educational system, providing content for schools at all levels, so working with teachers and schools, but in a silo, because I've been working in Finland. Right now, with Fun Academy, what we're doing differently is looking immediately at a global solution. Everything we do now is born globally, not for Finland, but learning from others, helping others learn from Finland. So I generally believe that togetherness is the thing that we should be looking at. That will be the killer app. There won't be a killer app, but it's working on the future of education together. And I'm not saying that it's a curriculum that we should be sharing, because we have different kinds of needs all around the world. People have different kinds of knowledge that they need in their context. But what we could be looking at more closely together is how people learn. What are the methods? What's the way of learning in the future? Sharing those innovations is something that we should be working on together in the world.
And can you give us some sort of an example of how you've been doing this so far?
Well, so far we've been working in the early years education field, and we looked at what could be global and what are the things that we have similar all around the world, and then looking at the differences, celebrating the differences. But this happens only, in connection with the teachers. We're connecting children, we're connecting teachers, we're working with universities, and we're discussing these at also government level. So sharing all the different approaches from day one is what we're doing in the early years education space. And now we're moving from early years also to primary and secondary level. But repeating myself, doing it together.
So for a country that is used to doing things together, to a country that is very well known around the world on its technology. We are the country of Nokia, MySQL, SSH, IRC. What do you feel when you hear the word education technology, and what is sort of if you needed to coin a buzzword for the education technology sector for 2017, what would it be? Any marketing people here?
Well, so first of all, technology, when I think about it, modern technology is, you've just applied technology to this sector that is basically the last big sector that hasn't been transformed yet, because everything else has, whether it's communication, whether it's digital, media, whether it's healthcare, transportation, all these things have been totally disrupted and transformed. And education, to a large extent, is still the same that it used to be 100 years ago. Now you're starting to see different applications, whether it's early stage education, whether it's K-12, whether it's higher education or ongoing education, they're starting to get applied and you're starting to see changes. And I think we're now in a period where you're going to see a very significant transformation happening soon. As far as a buzzword, specifically in the higher education space, I think one that you'll hear more and more is what we call knowledge as a currency.
Ooh, which, like blockchain for education.
Well, essentially, it doesn't matter anymore if you have a Harvard degree or a Stanford degree. It matters what you know. So you can learn from so many different areas nowadays. It's going to be the quality and the expertise you provide, not what your diploma says. And that's something. By the way, I'm stealing this from my partner Michael Mo. He invented that phrase, but that's something that I truly believe in.
Does that sound scary for you?
Not scary. I'm open to new kind of ideas and innovations. I think the big challenge when we're talking about technology and education is to find a kind of shared language with kind of two different fields. And the kind of everyday life in schools, for example, it's very busy. They have a lot of things to do. And so the kind of, when technology comes involved, it really must help the teaching and learning that happens there. You asked for a kind of a word to describe for the coming year, and from my perspective, what I'm looking for is that we could find solutions for kind of learning analytics, because we do have a lot of data, but we don't utilize it for the best of kind of learning and kind of understanding what we have learned and how that could be used forward. And for example, helping the dropout problem in youth generation. So I hope that we can come up with some new solutions next year.
So how do you feel about learning analytics? Are you doing anything in that realm, or would your buzzword be something very different?
Probably different, because one challenge that we have is when we talk about technology, we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're probably talking about totally different things. First of all, technology, one point of view with technology is that it could support pedagogy. It can be a tool. It can be a distribution vehicle for content. That's one issue. And then teachers, I understand that they can be saying no to technology if they don't really feel that it's supporting their pedagogical approach, and that's fine. That's one angle. But the totally other angle is that technology, we should also be teaching what technology actually means, or digitalization, in our world today. How is it affecting the world? How does the world work? What's happening now that is affected by digital or via technology? So educators, parents should be getting our heads around what that means, so that we could educate our kids to not be passive targets or passive consumers, but rather be people who are making their own decision, irrelevant of what technology is doing to them or pushing toward them. So understanding how the world works, and that I think is a very, very important responsibility of the educational system, of schools, and we should be paying more attention to what it is that we're educating when we're talking about technology. And a totally other question is that what kinds of tools are we using to help people understand how the world works?
So if you needed to put that into a buzzword, because people have an attention span of a lemming, what would the buzzword be?
I don't know.
Okay, so we have education as currency, learning as analytics, and I'll think for you like a topic of maybe tools versus like how the world works or something like that. Anyways.
By the way, mine was knowledge as a currency.
Knowledge as a currency, yes. There you go. So we're here in Finland, where our educational system teaches us to raise everyone equally up, because we're a small country and we need everyone to be a part of building this country. And now here we are at Slush, where the big mantra is all about excellence, all about being world-class, all about the individual. How do you see these two worlds meeting? Can education and Silicon Valley shake hands happily?
I think they can. But you have to make sure that they do, that it's not that they automatically work that way. Actually, I see it so that when we talk about technology and we talk about education, there's a kind of a constant race between those two. What I mean by that is that when you talk about technology generally, it kind of deals new cards. And some people get better cards and some worse. Some are able to utilize the new possibilities of technology and others aren't. And then that's the role for the education system to make sure that everybody could have the basic skills and knowledge to utilize the new possibilities. So it's kind of, technology is always a challenge for education to keep up with. And if those two things don't go hand in hand, the equal opportunities and the kind of thrive for high quality and innovativeness, this system don't work.
Equity and equality probably means something, again, different in Finland and in other places. And equity and equality should not mean that everyone gets the same medicine, but it should be giving everyone the opportunity to grow to their best selves and be able to then serve their communities and do something that they're good at and passionate about and find their livelihoods. So I think even in Finland we have a lot to do with equity and equality. But something that we are doing right is making sure that we have enough freedom and room for creativity and innovation. We are a nation of playfulness and exploration in our education system, and I hope that will not change for the worse. It's definitely important for a person to have a balanced life with rest, play, and work in healthy balance, with healthy nutrition and physical exercise, also as part of the planned program in the life of early years, but also the young people. So I think the balance is something that we have gotten correctly, but then there are other things that we should be maybe working on more in our educational system, because we find amazing things all around the world that we should be learning from. So I hope Finland is not too arrogant and too siloed in our ways, and that we'd be as open-minded as we were in the 60s when we started our path on systemic change in education that does take time. So we need a lot of studying to do, and again, working together to find the best practices and then implement them here, but also implement them globally together.
So what about when you see a founder who says that, oh, I just want equality for everyone, not the cutthroat competition, what do you say to them?
And the one thing I want to mention here is, there was some research done which is pretty amazing and worrying at the same time. Looking at kids from age 0 to 4, between kids who are born in wealthy families and kids who are born in poor families. So those born in poor families hear about 3 million words per year from their parents. Those in a wealthy family hear about 11 million words per year. So by age 4, there is a 30 million word gap between these kids. And essentially you start, life with a huge disadvantage. So in a way, it's the wealth level of your parents that, place you where you are to start your educational career. And that's a huge problem. And that's where, companies that are focused on early, there's a lot of opportunity in the early education space that will have a very disruptive power to change that. And definitely, I think that Silicon Valley and can be applied to many different things that are done. I mean, Finland and Singapore, in my opinion, are the two most innovative countries when it comes to education. You see that in the rankings, you see that in the openness of on a political level and of the society. You see that in terms of how teachers are paid and treated. To be a teacher in Finland, you have to have a master's degree. It's one of the best paid jobs. It's people want to be teachers. It's the total opposite in the US, and therefore the quality there is, sucks, unfortunately. And that shouldn't be the case. It should be, all over the world, the same model that works here, that works in Singapore, should be applied to different places as well.
You're talking about the vocabulary, and that brings me to also think about one problem that technology and digitalization brings to education. The fact that I'm worried about parents' screen time. Parents are hiding themselves behind their own devices. A parent is watching their Facebook feed. They're using the device for many things that are of interest to the parent, and that means that they're talking less to the children, which means that even in the wealthier families, that will lessen the vocabulary of the children. And then if we talk about something even more important, the social emotional skills of these children, when they're not interacting with the parents aren't giving them the attention that they need for their brain to develop. So we're doing a lot of harm also if we're not paying attention to the parents' screen time when we're talking about education, especially in the very important earlier stages.
So walking around here in Slush, you hear a lot of words like A/B testing. You hear about growth, about retention, and you hear about scale. How do we scale education?
That's a big challenge, because I think Saku was right when he was talking about silos. And I also agree that the kind of future of teaching and learning, it's already here today. It's in individual classrooms, it's in individual schools. But the problem is that how do you make it systemic? How do you kind of scale it? And I think what we should do more is to share the experiences, share the best practices. Also to emphasize more on the kind of a peer-to-peer learning with teachers, because it's not only the kind of teacher education, but it's also that how existing teachers are kept in space, what's happening. So I think you have to see the kind of development of the education system as a more kind of a holistic way and have that kind of shared learning kind of attitude in the kind of how the system is developed. And then it must happen kind of bottom up, that if that does not happen on the school level, on the between schools, between teachers, nobody like my own board or agency, we cannot do it. We have to make it kind of embedded in the system.
But what if there's someone outside from the industry who comes in and says that I'm too restless for this, let's break things and make stuff happen, and has the sort of can-do attitude? Is like...
Well, when we're talking about the education system, I'm a bit sorry to say, but I think that we're talking about things that take some time. And we have to kind of understand that learning is about human interaction, and learning by its nature has a kind of slow character in it. So I don't believe that there are kind of very rapid solutions.
Yeah, and I would agree on that. And you know, learning nowadays starts at age 0 and it goes until basically you die. It used to be that at age 18 you drop out of learning and you do something for the rest of your life. That's not the case anymore. And I was watching Daniel Ek yesterday. He said that, you know, in his 10 years at Spotify, he had to learn 8 different jobs basically, because you keep on evolving, things keep on changing. You have to, you know, start as this, then you become the next level, and that's what's happening. So yeah, it's a very long process, but then you start to see very disruptive things in each one of those levels that can make big changes in the chain.
And if we're looking at the systemic change, that definitely takes time, but at the same time, there are probably scalable products that will be coming in and supporting this systemic change. And we shouldn't be afraid of those like fast products that are out in the digital world, or any like new innovations that will help this systemic change go into the right direction. But none of these like single products will make any big difference if we don't pay attention to what we're really trying to achieve on the systemic side.
I mean, one thing that I would add, I think MBA level education is, or masters, is one of those areas that's gonna change very quickly, and it's getting disrupted very quickly. So we are, you know, one of our large investments is in Coursera, and they just rolled out an IMBA program together with the University of Illinois, which is exactly the same MBA, you know, that once you complete it, you get the exact same degree as if you went to Illinois and did it there, except it's fully online, it's fully remote, so you can do it anywhere in the world, and it costs a fourth of the price. So essentially for $19,000, you get an MBA.
Yeah. I think we're kind of, now that we're talking here, we're talking pretty much of the school system or education system as we know, but I think there may be even a bigger system or change will happen with the fact that I believe that we're seeing a change where work becomes learning. Work is equal to learning.
And learning is fun.
And learning is fun.
And learning is fun. And that kind of course the context is changing every day in working life. So the thing is that you have to learn all the time. And I think that will be a kind of also a huge business in the future, that what kind of tools can support that on the job learning.
So this event is all about the rebels, all about the change makers, all about the misfits. I would like to ask from you guys all, what is the one thing that you truly believe about education that very few other people agree with you? This is Peter Thiel's contrarian right, the idea that there are always these areas where one person is against all the other odds. So what are the things that you believe that very few other people agree with you on education technology? Or either or.
Well, I don't know if very few others believe the contrary or not. I believe parents play an enormous importance in education, in my opinion, until age 12, 13, 14.
Pretty unpopular opinion in Finland, for sure. So.
Yeah, what feels like is happening is that more and more parents are living, in those early years, more and more because of parents working longer hours, because just the entire labor market changing. That it's the opposite is happening, and that people believe that technology alone will fix it, and schools will fix it. That's not the case, because parents have to educate the children to be wanting to learn, to take it as fun, and to be also very into learning. So I think.
Well, some people disagree with me when we say that learning is fun. They say that it can't be and it shouldn't be and it isn't. So that's like one thing where we see a lot of disagreement as well as appreciation. One other thing that personally I firmly believe in, that we just have to provide access to every single child to reach high quality education.
Opinion.
Yeah, that's not my opinion that people are against,
okay.
But people say that it's impossible. But I say it cannot be impossible. It has to be possible. Beautiful. It has to be.
What about Olli-Pekka?
Well, I don't believe that kind of testing and measuring outcomes would make the learning outcomes better. And that's something that when I'm with my colleagues with other countries, they are strongly opposed to this view.
Yep.
But that's our experience from Finland, that testing does not make the results better, and kind of measuring teachers' outcomes, for example, is not a way to support a kind of development atmosphere in schools.
Absolutely, good answers. And the final question still has to do a little bit with rebelliousness. People working in the educational system are often people who are good at following rules, who are good at answering questions, not posing them. How do you learn to get in good trouble? And if you have any personal anecdotes.
How do you learn to get in good trouble?
Yeah, how do you get in good trouble and how do you teach that?
By being disruptive, by turning an industry upside down.
But at the age of 7, how do you do that?
Well, no, I'm not talking specifically of that. I'm just talking more broadly, and I can give some examples. Take Uber, Lyft, and all the ride-sharing companies and what they've done with the taxi industry and transportation. They basically, within 3 years, they put it upside down. Same thing with Airbnb and the hotel industry. These are very disruptive ideas because there was an incumbent industry that was becoming ineffective, and it was ineffective for decades, and
Absolutely.
Nobody did anything about it, and then suddenly, it happens. And
so Sanna, how do you teach that?
Having a safe environment where you're safe to make mistakes, so that you don't physically or mentally hurt, but that you make the actual mistakes, and then the adults can be watching and observing the children playing freely, making a mess of themselves, and the adults not butting into that. So that's it's a good way of teaching the children to be in trouble.
And how do you teach the teachers to get into good trouble?
Well, I think sometimes it's a good kind of quality also when we're talking about a safe environment. For a teacher, it's the same thing as it for a leader, that to be kind of in certain situations to be kind of slow and dull, not kind of knowing what to do, kind of leaving the problem entirely open. And I know that for a teacher, that is a kind of a difficult situation, because teachers are known for knowing things. But I think it's a good thing sometimes to admit that I don't have the slightest idea how to go forward with this question.
So next up, we're going to hear a little bit about raising these next rebellious entrepreneurs with a special announcement.
Exciting times. Cha. Exciting times. Quite often when we are discussing about the future of education, people are saying things like, you should be teaching this kind of skills, cooperation, creative skills, and so on and so on. But the key problem is, how do you really make it happen? What should you do? And we thought that because Finland has obviously one of the best startup events in the world, Slush, and Finland has one of the best education systems in the world, maybe we could do something bold in an international scale. So before going into the details, let's see one video. So, what is our goal? I'm going to be getting back to that one in a minute. Before that one, I'll give a word to a CEO of Slush, Marianne Vikkula, about kind of like the key personalities and so on that one should be teaching in schools in order to empower the next generation. Marianne, please.
Thank you. So, we at Slush, from the very early on, embarked on a journey to solve a challenge. We felt that 5 years ago, the environment and the attitudes towards entrepreneurship were not very supportive in the region. And thus, we embarked on a journey to change that, to make entrepreneurship a viable career choice for students in universities. And I really feel that throughout the past 5 years, there's been a significant change, and entrepreneurship is actually a viable career choice. And much of that is, for example, through volunteering. Much of that is through actions. But so what's next? This is why we joined the Startup High School initiative. We really feel that entrepreneurship is more of a mindset. It's a mindset that you can learn through actions, by doing. And that's why we wanted to create a school and courses that involve you already in high school, involve you mostly through doing, learning by doing, making mistakes along the way, and finally kind of understanding what entrepreneurship is all about.
Thanks, Marianne. And before going into the details how the whole system will work, let's go into the content. We have identified some of the best pedagogical forces in Finland. And our principal will be Pekka Peura, who is kind of like one of my favorite teachers in Finland. And like mentioned, before going into the details of the structure of Startup High School, few words about content of the high school. Pekka, please.
Hi. So everyone who has built up their own startup or some other companies knows what a great learning experience that is. And we would like to provide our students same kind of experience, but in a safe environment called school. We will have 3 main themes in our courses. First of all will be thinking skills. That's really important nowadays and also in the future. Second one is learning by doing. We want to help students to follow their vision, their dreams. And the third one is we will have a great lecturers who will teach what is it to build up your own startup, what it needs.
And because problem with these schools, we didn't want to make a niche school that is happening somewhere in Helsinki. Instead of that one, we wanted to create a totally different kind of approach. So starting from fall 2017, any high school in Finland can be a startup high school. So kids don't have to leave their own home city in order to be part of the high school. There's 75 courses in each high school. 3 of them will be about entrepreneurial skills, and they will be taught mostly using our online platform, which is created by Ottawa Opisto. And a few words about the online platform, Ida and Aki.
Yes. The great thing about Startup High School is that you can study in a huge high school in Helsinki or a small 20-something student high school in, let's say, Karkkila, and still you can attend this great Startup High School. And we provide the framework and the support for the students to guide their own learning experiences.
The online platforms we use enable the students to work with enthusiastic and motivated peer groups, no matter where they live, to acquire the skills and the competencies and the knowledge they really need in the future.
Fantastic. And all of this, since we are in Finland, all of this is non-profit. It's for free for any high school student in Finland. And this is made possible by our sponsors, OP, Osuuspankki, and by the Foundation of Finnish Technology Industries. But we are also, our plan is to give everything for free as a gift to any country in the world. So we really want to make a global revolution teaching about these skills. And lastly, the last thing is that we have an extremely solid pedagogical background in everything we do, but we also wanted to have a special lecturers who are teaching about these skills that you need in order to set up a high school startup or do something great. And could I have some of our lecturers who have agreed to take part on here? We are having people like Ilkka Paananen, we are having people like Miki Kuusi, the former CEO of here. We have Petteri Koponen, founder of Lifeline. We have one of the best hip-hop duos in Finland teaching kids about what it takes to set up your company on the music industry. And last but not least, we are also having Marianne Vikkula. So my last question in here is that, Marianne, what will be the key things you will be teaching in Startup High School next fall?
I'm actually thinking of sharing and teaching stories of that it's actually okay to fail at school. I don't think that the current school system really well teaches that. And even more importantly, how to get over that. But so, thank you, Saku. Thank you to the full team behind Startup High School.
And spread the word. We want to have great students. Thank you.
Yeah.